Hello and welcome to Energy and Environment Weekly. I am Joycelyn, Elakeche, Adah. And we begin today's episode with the latest positive news in the Nigeria's oil and gas sector, which is the passing of the much-awaited Petroleum Industry Bill. And joining us on the program virtually to discuss matters arising from the passage of the bill are Professor Wumi Ladari. Presently, he serves with Ghana National Petroleum Corporation, Petroleum Research Chair in Oil and Gas Studies at the University of Cape Coast Oil and Gas Institute. He's also the Executive Director, Emmanuel Egboga Foundation for Petroleum Industry, Economics and Policy Advocacy, Abuja. He's a Professor Emeritus in Petroleum Economics at the Louisiana State University, Energy Studies, USA, and Director, Society of Petroleum Engineers, Africa Region. Also, he is an expert in the upstream petroleum economics. Also joining us virtually is Mr. Bashir Usman. He is the Chief Editor, Publisher, Valuechain Oil and Gas Magazine. He is an associate member, Advertising Practitioner Council of Nigeria, and an energy expert. And finally is my colleague with over 3 decades experience covering the energy bit. He is head brand and communication for Jake Riley Limited. His knowledge of the sector cuts through the entire value chain, the upstream, midstream, and downstream. He also has key knowledge of the oil industry agencies, parastatals, and international oil companies. Gentlemen, you're all welcome to Energy and Environment Weekly. Now, before we begin, let's take a look at some developing stories. The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries and its allies, known as OPEC+, have resumed talks this morning following a failure of reaching a deal on oil output policy last week. It's been reported that there seemed to be a standoff between Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates, which analysts say could delay plans of pumping more oil to the market to the end of the year to cool global oil prices. Last week, Friday, OPEC and its allies voted to increase production by 2 million barrels as from August to December 2021 and to also extend the remaining output cuts to the end of 2022. This brought about objections from the United Arab Emirates. Let's take a quick break and we'll be back with more stories from the energy sector. We'll be right back.
It is with a deep sense of responsibility that I consider this an honor to be with you at this launching of the single largest vaccination program ever in the history of Federal Capital Territory to herald our decisive victory over the COVID-19 pandemic. As I stand before you, I took my job on Saturday, and I'm still standing day and a half. This is a demonstration to make us know that at least we have about 72 hours from then till now. And I am standing to speak to you, not just to convince you, but also to encourage you that vaccinations have always been doubted wherever in the country. If today they are to bring back polio vaccines, I know some people will still say no to it. But at the same time, we have not, so far, by the grace of God, seen any casualty in Nigeria. And I will also share with you, just like I will encourage you after your own job, to please go to the portals and fill the forms to also share your experiences. But it's better to be safe. Please ensure you take your jab. to make Nigeria a COVID-19-free environment.
You're all watching Energy and Environment Weekly on ASU Television, and now to matters arising. The much-awaited Petroleum Industry Bill has finally been passed. The bill, which has been in the Senate for over a decade, was finally passed last week Thursday by the 9th Assembly. The bill is said to be the key to reforming the Nigeria oil and gas sector. It seeks to create a commercially oriented and profit-driven petroleum entity and made attractive to investors. Once again, I'd like to welcome all of our guests to Energy and Environment Weekly. And we'll begin with Professor Elakeche. Sir, you're welcome to Energy and Environment Weekly. Professor Elakeche, can you hear me? Are you there? Can you hear me? Okay, I will be starting with you. Now, from your perspective and with over 40 years experience in the sector, particularly with the bill, why do you think it took so long for the bill to be passed, if indeed it holds the key to reforming the sector? And with all of the controversies, do you think it will be possible to satisfy every stakeholders involved in this bill?
Well, good morning, Joyce, for inviting me. I really appreciate the opportunity, and good morning all and my panelists. First, I must just congratulate the 9th National Assembly for coming through with their promise to pass the bill. Second, I will not sacrifice a good bill for a perfect bill, because there's no perfect bill. Now, the reasons are many why the bill did not pass through since 2008. One is normal in the political process for sectional interests to dominate the debate. Second, rent seeking and rent sharing was part of the issues that we had over the years. People are just looking at the money. They are not thinking in terms of the future. And finally, there was no political will over the years to be able to go through. Right now, we are fortunate that we have the same political party in power. And so it was a lot easier for them to come to terms with some of the issues that were raised. Yes, it's not a perfect bill, but any good bill will remove the uncertainty in the investment environment. So I really congratulate them. I wouldn't say it's a perfect bill because there are so many things that could be improved upon. But you never can have a perfect bill in a political system, an heterogeneous political system for that matter. So I just commend those who finally passed the bill and the president to sign it, even though there are certain aspects of it that I personally don't like. But I will still go on and hope that we can amend it in the future. But kudos to the National Assembly, the 9th one, looking at when we started, 2008 up to now.
Okay, so what do you think was the driving force for this assembly in passing the bill? What was the motivation for this assembly?
Well, the motivation, I happen to have interacted with all of them since 2008. In fact, some of the principals, I took them to places to talk to them about petroleum economics. As far back as 2001, 2003, 2013, all over the years. So they understand the implications of not passing the bill this particular time. Because transition dynamics are real. petroleum lifestyle in terms of attracting investment is on a life support. And the competition is keener now than ever before, because in the West African coast, you have too many countries producing oil, and their understanding of the process is about where we were in 1958. And I spoke in Ghana about 5 days ago on these particular issues. And Ghana is better prepared in the way in which petroleum management is managed than we are. So passing this bill is one step in the right direction. It's just like taking a monkey behind your back. So again, I commend them. The implementation strategy going forward is the key.
That's exactly where I'm coming to. Now that it has been passed, there are some disagreements, some stakeholders calling for an upward review. Do you think we're going to see a situation whereby the bill would stakeholders will seek for the bill to be worked upon, and then we'll see it being withdrawn and worked upon, and will this take another decade, to finalize all of these issues?
Well, if I'm addressing all stakeholders, we call it mutuality of interest, optimization of the mutuality of interest. In a political system, you cannot have your way. But the majority, and that's, I won't have time to address it because some of the statement may be too political. The majority must be conscious of the transcent of power. And a petroleum bill like this must not be looking at the benefit of now. The attention must be drawn, in my opinion, to the future. Listen, one of the reasons why the petroleum industry bill has not been passed till today is because the people in power are too preoccupied with the benefit of today in the legislative process today. So I will appeal to the stakeholders to think more or less of what we call parity to optimality, whereby I may not get what I want, but I can still shake hands and be happy for the sake of the future. And I can begin to pinpoint some of the things that optics is giving people wrong interpretation of some of the section of the bill that needs explanation and public education. Like 30% earmarked for frontier exploration, like 3% or 5% distribution for the host community. I think all of this will work on, and it's in the hand of the presidency to think more of the future than now.
I'll come back to you, Professor. Let me talk to Mr. Usman. The bill has been passed, Mr. Bashir, and what does this mean to the ordinary Nigerian? What does the ordinary Nigerian stand to benefit from the passage of the bill?
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, the members of the panel. Joycelyn, just like you said, the benefit of this to the ordinary Nigerian is that it would trickle down, to the masses of this country. First of all, the essence of having this bill, why, we have been pushing for this bill, is to have a stronger, efficient, and attractive, energy industry. Just like the Prof said, of recent, in the last 10 years, we have had, many countries in Africa today that are oil-producing countries. Before, many years ago, we were very few in Africa. But as of today, we have many sister African countries today that are oil-producing nations. And because we don't have this law here in Nigeria, it makes, our industry uncompetitive. Many investments are supposed to be here in Nigeria that are supposed to find their way to Nigeria. We have gone, past us. They have taken them, to other African countries that have the enabling law that is governing, the industry. So, if we have a strong and efficient and attractive industry in Nigeria, it would translate into more investment into this country. investment in exploration, investment in production, investment in downstream, midstream, and others. And if we're able to generate, the benefit, the income that will come that is attached to this investments, definitely government will have more revenue to execute, its responsibility, to the citizens. And the responsibility of the government to the citizen is to provide the basic amenities, infrastructures, and other things. So you link this bill now with the benefits that the people stand to gain, is there will be more revenue for the federal government if we're able to attract the investments. Government will use that revenue to better the lives of its citizens.
So in all, it's for the betterment of every Nigerian. Let me talk to Daniel, my colleague. Daniel, in 2017, in an effort to reform the sector and better understand the bill was split into four, namely the Petroleum Industry Governance Bill, the Petroleum Industry Administration Bill, the Petroleum Industry Fiscal Bill, and the Petroleum Host Society Bill. We do know that the reform will start with the NNPC, which is the country's sector regulator. Now, the bill seeks to unpack the sector, make the NNPC a private limited liability company, and really deregulate the sector. Reduce certain taxes and make the sector more attractive to investors. Now, with the scrapping of the PPPRA, the worry out there, especially for that Nigerian that does not understand how the sector works, and is thinking, well, thousands of people will lose their jobs. Do you have an idea of how this process will unfold and what will become of PPPRA?
Good afternoon, panelists. Good afternoon, Joycelyn, for having me. Thank you once again.
Very
importantly, just like Professor has said, this is one very important bill that Nigerians have clamored for almost 2 decades now. And here we have come to almost a conclusion of it until, of course, we get that harmonization from both houses and the assent from the president, which we hope to see before the end of the year. Now, straight to your question. For some of the worries that have been expressed in the course of the PIB journey, especially as regards labor issues, the fact that if this particular bill becomes a law, some agencies will have to either be scrapped or be merged into one. But the worries have really been taken care of because once PPPRA goes, of course, you have the downstream regulator in the Nigerian midstream and downstream authority, which this particular bill has created. That particular authority, that organization, will replace PPPRA. And of course, it is natural for some of the workers that have been at PPPRA to be transitioned into the new organization or the agency that will be an offshoot of PPPRA. And of course, that also goes for DPR. In this particular bill, we understand that you have the upstream regulator. You also have the downstream regulator, so two divergent agencies, one that will regulate the upstream and one that will regulate the downstream. So naturally, workers who have been with these organizations will naturally transition into the new organization that will be created.
We're losing you there, Daniel. But let me go back to the professor. Before we move to the host communities, Professor, which you spoke on, let's talk on the issue of fuel pricing. Now that food regulation has begun, we all know that our refineries are still under rehabilitation and not functioning yet. So with the passage of the bill, are we going to see an increase in the pump price of PMS, especially as international prices are on a steady rise?
Well, that is I know that's where there's probably a lot of concern, and I hope the government will put some palliative measure in place. What I've suggested is the transition to full deregulation may begin with partial deregulation. Unfortunately, the society also needs to be highly of great integrity. There is moral decadence in the society that even if you have a good law and a good policy, there may be problems. But if the price is deregulated and we do not have an efficient downstream, the price will normally move along the line with the price of crude. That is normal. There is a direct correlation between the price of crude and the price at the pump. However, the government can have a palliative measure, especially for the public transporters among us. And I've suggested in the past that the government has a retail section that NNPC owns. And NNPC could then sell that at a cost price during the partial deregulation phase. I will not suggest a fiasco transfer from maybe 200 naira per liter to what the price really ought to be, looking at the exchange rate, because they are imported product. So certainly you will expect the price of petroleum product to go to the rightful place, and that is not where it is as of now. I currently live in Ghana, and a liter of petrol in Ghana is almost 400 naira. And I live in the United States, where I'm speaking from now. And the price of petrol from here in the United States, if you take the tax out of it, it's almost 800 naira per liter. I know people will say that, but of course the per capita income is low in Nigeria, and I understand that. But you cannot continue to subsidize petroleum product at nearly 10% of your annual budget. It is suboptimal. And you could see the social welfare loss in the society with the roads, the schools, the health system, and transportation system. So we can adjust. I mean, look at what we are paying for telecommunication, and we are not dying. So I think we can live with that. Once the government is transparent and accountable with respect to the resources in their hand. The Nigerian people are very resilient. There's nothing they cannot adapt to if it's going to add value. And personally, I believe that the deregulation of price in the downstream in Nigeria will significantly add more value to the society and the economy than what we have now. It's proven all over the world. You cannot continue to subsidize consumption at the expense of expanding the productivity of the economy. And I look forward to that.
Well said. Let's look at the host communities. You know, initially they asked for 10% and got 3%. That's less than half of their initial request. There's been a debate if they got 5% or 3%. This morning, I also read that they got 3%. What's your take on this? Are we going to see these host communities accept this percent, or are we going to see a situation whereby they would truly call for an upward review?
Well, personally, if I'm going to be frank with you, I think people should look beyond now. I tell people prosperity without posterity in view is inconsequential. So I will appeal to those community to go back to the table during this harmonization process. I'm not particular about the percentage. I'm more concerned with the base. I personally don't think tying host community development fund to operating expenditure is optimal. I think because you have heterogeneous operators in the system, you're going to say that some community will be worse off because the people operating in their community don't have a big annual operating cost. And I think I've argued this over and over again because I've had the privilege to speak about nearly every aspect of the petroleum industry bill. I think the government, in my opinion, needs to be more proactive so as to be able to solve one problem. I mean, double problem with one stone. The issue with the Niger Delta community is not necessarily about money. It's about development. And there are so many things that have been given to them that were not properly defined. It's just that they don't have a political will. All they need to go is to go to the 13% derivation. Up it, which they should have done many years ago, surrender a good portion of it to the host community instead of tying it to the operating people. Second, you have the Niger Delta Ministry Fund. Surrender a portion of it to the host community. Third, you even have NCDMB. Surrender a portion of it to the host community. Fifth, you have the state budget. Surrender part of it to the host community. Tie the host community fund to operating expenditure. To me, is not pragmatic to solve the agitation and personally the ownership issue. And I mentioned this in many forums over the years. The majority must always be concerned with the minority concern. And I don't see that in this bill. I think this bill is skewed, currently, in my opinion, to those in power. And that is postponing the evil day. I've already pronounced the solution to those community. And it's not difficult. It's done all over the world. Royalty is more or less a surrendering cola to whoever owns something. And if the government in this bill can surrender 10% management fee to NNPC and surrender a portion of federation account in terms of profit oil, royalty oil, total oil for future exploration, to me, there's nothing constitutionally illegal if you surrender a portion of 13% derivation directly to host community fund, surrender 5% to host community of the royalty, surrender 1% of MCDNB to host community, and then define how the money is used. You will solve a lot of problems. 200,000 barrels per day of oil has not been produced in Ogoni land since 1995 because of equity issue. Take the bull by the horn. Do the needful with this operation of this opportunity to reform the industry. Don't do transfer payment because it destroys community. Do project development. And that's the beauty of this solution to the host community problem. Host Community Trust Fund for development of the place. I want to see what I call the energy corridor of Nigeria, spanning from Port Harcourt, Calabar, Lagos, all of those places with 6 lanes road for future generation. And you solve the problem. But do not sacrifice a good bill on the altar of a perfect bill, because that altar does not exist. Let's work out with what we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Daniel, let me come to you. Are you still with us, Daniel?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Okay, yes, I can. I remember you were a guest on this program some time ago, and you did say that you expect fuel prices could or might hit 250 naira per liter. Do you think your projection is about to come to reality now, Daniel?
All right. Looking at what we have on ground now, the prevailing circumstances, oil price going up in international markets. Of course, it's a major cost element in the pricing of petroleum products. And we see that NNPC is trying as much as it could to ensure that it takes some of those burden that ordinarily would have passed to consumers in the way of trying to subsidize products. For how long it can withstand this is what we're not sure. But of course, also OPEC is doing as much as it could to ensure that price is within the range where it's be of a benefit to member countries. Let's not be pessimistic. I hope with some of the interventions that are coming up, especially around the we also have the Abuja refinery, because some of the interventions that NNPC is currently trying to achieve. And one thing that US must have the PID in that thought that is in for the Nigerian petroleum industry. Much as I agree to that, but it's something like Prof said, it's a futuristic one. Once it is between when it will eventually become effective, and we'll now start seeing the gain. So it's something of the future, but for now, we just have to let the status quo be, and hope that NNPC will still muzzle that financial power to be able to continue subsidizing products.
But Daniel, if you can hear me, NNPC have said it over and over and over again that subsidizing does not help the country. And you heard the Prof rightly say, he said in other countries, PMS prices as much as 800, and just our neighboring country here in Ghana, they're paying as much as 400 naira per litre. Are you saying that the NNPC should continue subsidizing even though it is not to the benefit of Nigerians?
No, absolutely no right in the economics or even Nigerians who want to toe that line, because it hasn't done us any good at all. But I'm trying to say that the condition, the situation we are trying to solve the problem, let it be that we solve the problem once and for all. I don't know if you understand me, because we have been on this path of removing subsidy, and at the end of the day, it gets returned again. We remove, and at the end, lasting solution. So that is one that we don't kill NNPC before we find that lasting solution. It must be immediate. That last solution, if it's totally the Dangote refinery to come on stream, would that be the magic one to solve the petroleum product problem in the country? Maybe 50%. And what other initiative can the government also embark on? We've seen the focus now towards CNG gas. We haven't really seen.
We're losing Daniel, but let's go back to the Prof. Prof, before we finally let you go, we know it's quite early in the US. As one who has been advising NAS over the years, what major area do you think the bill still needs some adjustment? That's for you, Prof.
Daniel is back on, because Daniel is still speaking. But
okay.
I don't know.
Daniel, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, please go ahead. We could not hear you.
Okay, so let me just round up. Let me round up my thoughts. So what I was saying is, subsidy has to go. Is the right thing to do. Any right-thinking government will, just like Prof said, you don't subsidize consumption. So it has to go, but in the immediate, in the interim, what can we do to ensure that Nigerians don't pay the price, Nigerians don't suffer? Of course, the belief is that we have oil, so why should we be paying in quotes high prices for it? So while we wait for game-changing projects to come on stream, like the Dangote refinery, the Boa refineries, and some other modular refineries that we're banking on, what can we do in the immediate time to ensure that we don't kill NNPC? Because the way we're going now, with the subsidy and every other burden that we have placed on NNPC, I think it's just a matter of time before the whole bubble will burst. So, Prof, you can go ahead.
Okay, as I was asking that, as one who has been advising NAS over the years, what major area do you think the bill still needs some adjustment?
Well, Listen, let me say again that I don't expect a perfect bill, and I do not expect that one person's idea should dominate. In my opinion, I think I don't want anything that will limit us from being passing this bill. But I still think if you go to the institution and governance, I still think there's something missing. You are giving a lot of responsibility to the minister's office, but you didn't say anything about reorganizing the ministry in such a way that you have professionals there to advise the minister. Otherwise, the minister will continue to depend on NNPC and the regulator to advise him. I think they need to think about a line there, giving power to a permanent technical body in the ministry that can survive from one government to the other. If you look at the petroleum policy and you look at the gas policy and you look at what is being done in the ministry today with respect to all of these auto gas and so on and so forth, the bulk of the gas policy are not necessarily being implemented. And it's because of the technical people who are to leave. I think capacity building is very critical for the Ministry of Petroleum if the minister has to discharge the function. Secondly, governance and institution. Yes, it appears we have settled for dual regulatory body, but we must start to make them apolitical with the appointment process. I see the authority, this is my opinion, with the way the board is constituted as more or less like job for the boards. And we need to be careful in that appointment process if the authority is to do the responsibility. I am opposed to dual regulatory body, but I can live with it. Third, NNPC Limited. Again, I'm NNPC friendly. I believe in the national corporation. But I don't want, the way I read the bill, with the type of money they're throwing at them, they are going to kill NNPC. NNPC will still be behaving as if they are an agency of the government. Take some of those government responsibility from NNPC. You have competent hands for them to be like Saudi Aramco. I don't like this 30% money you are giving to NNPC and 10% management fee. You are going to cripple them in order to be able to have value with the amount of talent and resources that they have. They need to think about that. I want to advise the public to not be sentimental about 30% surrender to, even GMPC in Ghana gets appropriation to make sure that they continue to develop the national oil company strategy and objective. I don't see anything wrong with that, but don't specify to NNPC how they are supposed to spend their money. I think it's sending a wrong signal and a bad optics with this PIB. Now,
thank you so much, Professor. Thank you so much. That's as much as we can take for today. Professor Wumi, can you hear me? Thank you very much for your input. We are fast against time now. I would like to say a big thank you to all our panelists. Mr. Bashir, we are looking forward to this year's lecture on last year we had the Secretary General of APO who lectured us on the role of the media in the politics. We are looking forward to this year's own. Mr. Daniel Adugbo, thank you for being on Energy and Environment Weekly. And of course, Professor Wumi Iladari, it was an honor having you here. Gentlemen, I would like to say a big thank you to all of you and to your inputs on the topic for today. Well, that's as much as we can take on this episode of Energy and Environment Weekly. There would be a repeat of this program by 6 p.m. this evening, same station. Thank you all for watching. I am Joycelyn, Elakeche, Adah. Good afternoon.
And good afternoon. Thank you for inviting us.